Hey guys, what's up? This is a video I was asked to do quite a while ago actually, but I never got to doing, so I'm doing it now. This is Axolotl Basics 101. I was asked to do this a long time ago actually by a few people, and I never got around to doing it. So I'm doing it now. I'm hoping it will still be useful to some people. So yeah, it's a very sort of basic video on axolotls and axolotl care. I have one down here, if I can find him. He's all facing over from the camera, he's hiding a little bit, he's doing his thing. But yeah, so I was asked a long time ago to do this. I'm finally getting around to it now. This is basically this basic stuff from so you can get interested in them. Or if you're really interested, learn a little bit more about them, see it, in terms of maintenance, stuff like that. So they're an amphibian. They're neotenic, which means basically it's the same as like a frog. It's like a tadpole. They're like the baby stage of a salamander, but they're unique in they don't actually change. They don't become a salamander, although they can. I'll come back to that later. They stay in this sort of baby form, so to say, for their entire lives, and that's how they live, it's how they eat, mate, they do everything in this stage, which is quite unique. It's not something that often happens in the animal kingdom, but they do it. They're endangered in the wild. I think they're possibly even extinct in the wild at this point. They live in a single lake in Mexico. They used to be hunted a lot for food and stuff like that, so they're not really found in the wild anymore, but the trade in terms of them as pets and stuff like that is pretty much what saved them. And they're exceptionally bizarre animals, they look quite bizarre, the gills and the little smiley face sort of thing going on. But they have bizarre regeneration powers, for lack of a better term. There's been studies on limbs, even parts of the brain, spine, liver, kidney, internal organs, the heart, things that they'll be damaged in some way. They all then repair them, and obviously that's a huge thing in terms of medicine. So they've been studied quite a lot for that. But yeah, so they're very bizarre animals. So I'm going to go a little bit into terms of care. They can grow up to, on average, about a foot long, to 12 inches. You don't want a small tank for these guys. The minimum you want to look at is 2 foot or about 20 gallons. You need sort of a specific sort of tank. I started him off, he was a little one, he was only about yay big when I first got him. So when I got him, I started him off in a tank like this. That's about 20 inches, and that's fine, to be honest, when they're little. But as they grow up, you're going to want to look into bigger tanks. The one behind me, he's currently in 3'3". That's a little bit too big, to be honest, for a single axolotl. They on average they'll grow up to be about 12 inches long, a foot long. So, and the general rule of thumb is you want them the tank to be at least twice their length, and at least their sort of height. So you're looking at the minimum about 2 foot long, about 18 inches tall. That's the bare minimum, to be honest. And you can't really. It needs to sort of be like this, like a sort of a square or something like that, or rectangular. If it's a circle or one of those really long tower ones, that won't be good for them. They won't like that. And that's because they do like to walk around on the bottom. So obviously you need a large space for that. And they like to swim. They like to be able to swim back and forward and up and down all around. And if they can't do that, that's going to sort of frustrate them. It'll stress them out. It's not good. So a rectangular or sort of square, something like that, it's pretty much just a standard fish tank. Nothing weird, and they'll be fine. They'll be happy. Now, setting up your tank, there's a lot of information out there. Some people say to use gravel, some say sand. Personally, I use sand, and that's because if they end up eating it, which they will, because the way they eat is they sort of just open their mouths and dart forward, and a huge amount stuff, the food and everything around it gushes into their mouth. So you don't want, them to accidentally eat stones. It could cause damage or death, and you just hurt them. So personally, I don't do that. I prefer sand. That's all. I just pass straight through them if they're stupid enough to eat it. Water-wise, when you set your initial tank up, you want to ideally put in some. You can buy it from various fish shops. You want to buy the startup media sets, which is a whole bunch of good bacteria. You want to use dechlorinated water. Very easy to just fill up a bucket or a tank or whatever with water, and then wait like a day, 24 hours, 48 hours. All the chlorine will evaporate out, and you'll be left with clean water, so to speak. That's because chlorine is added to kill bacteria, but you want to encourage bacteria, the good bacteria, to grow in your water. So you do that in, you put your sand in, you put some plants, whatever else you might want in there, but not the animals. You put in your filter, you leave that running for a minimum of a week, 2 weeks. Just let it all run, and the good bacteria will build up in there. So when you introduce your axolotl, or any animal for that matter, the water will be safe. It's not going to be poisoned. And also when you buy something like an axolotl or other exotic animals, they tend to be somewhat expensive. You don't want to risk killing it and wasting a lot of money. So yeah. Now when you put them in, you want to ideally it should come in like a bag filled with water and air. Put that bag into your tank and just leave it for 20-30 minutes, and that will let the temperatures equalise. The water from the outside of the tank, of the bag, might be a lot warmer or colder. So let it equalise 20-30 minutes at the most. Just let it equalise, and then slowly let that sort of swim into, sort of lower in the bag, push him out a little bit. Just let him swim around, and the chances are he'll go straight to hiding somewhere, like in a plant or under a log or in a flower pot, something like that, and hide there. And then eventually they'll walk around. If you have lights in your tank, I was just turning them off. And because axolotls don't like bright lights. I know this one looks bright, but it's not actually that bright. They're not a fan of bright lights, so you don't want to stress them out unnecessarily. Just let them relax. They are nocturnal. They don't have eyelids, so they can't blink. Just remember this stuff. So yeah, you want to feed them sparsely for the first couple of days, let them sort of acclimatise. Still feed them, but not as much. This brings us to my next point, onto feeding. They will eat pretty much anything. They'll eat live food. You should always feed them live food when they're at least when they're not babies. Bloodworm, daphnia, brine shrimp, mealworms, earthworms. They'll eat pretty much anything, even other fish. But they'll eat fish, they'll eat shrimp, anything really. But if you're going to fill your tank up with other fish and stuff like that, be careful. If the fish are bigger than your axolotl, they may very well eat the axolotl or damage its gills, because the gills often look like bloodworm. So yeah, you don't want them to accidentally eat each other. What else? So yeah, food-wise, anything live really. It's always worth checking. Make sure it's not something. Make sure it's something you can actually eat, not something. If you put an earthworm in there, you might have to cut it up or something, because you don't want obviously it to eat something that's ridiculously large. So this brings me on to the next point in terms of water changing and water quality. You need to, I would say, change the water once a week, once every couple of weeks. Change it regularly, and that's because axolotls are quite sensitive to water changes, stuff like just levels of stuff in there, like chlorine, of nitrogen, of ammonia. They're very sensitive to that. You don't want them to build up, because that will stress them out and potentially kill them. Another thing that may happen is they may actually start to morph, which is a very bizarre thing for axolotls to do, but it isn't unheard of. They will actually change into their salamander form, which is obviously very bizarre, and it requires a whole different set of skills to care for. So it's not really something you want to happen. And axolotls can live was it 15 years, 10 to 15 years, I think it is. So you need to be prepared when you buy it to have that commitment. You need to make sure you've got the right equipment, or that you're willing to buy it when it needs it, and generally just make sure that you're caring for it properly. And you know, so they can grow up to a foot long, and they're quite powerful swimmers and stuff like that as well. So you need to be prepared, you know, to care for it. Make sure you can handle anything that goes wrong with it. It's a very brief sort of video for you guys. Give me a quick rundown on it. You know, if you have any questions about it, obviously ask me or do some other research. I may do a longer video at some point, just explaining a bit more with some other stuff. It's just really to get some basics across, because I see a lot of stuff about that, and like being asked questions about it and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a very sort of brief video for you guys about axolotl basics. You know, feel free to ask me questions or Google it or whatever. You know, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.